Welcome to Conversations with Heavy Cardboard. Today should be a really good time. I'm joined by a gentleman who is designed and published via his own and his wife's publishing house, Bezier Games, some of the toughest and best Age-of-Steam maps in existence, such as the Bay Area, Soul Train, Northern California. He also has designed and published some wildly popular games, such as Suburbia, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and the One Night Ultimate Werewolf series, not to mention published one of the games that we're going to be live streaming later this week that had a ton of buzz around it at Gen Con 50, which is Whistle Stop. And just because, that's not enough, he's written over 30 books, many to help folks with various computer programs such as Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, PageMaker, and of course, Microsoft Bob. I am, of course, speaking about Ted Alspach, board game designer, publisher, author. Welcome to Heavy Cardboard, Ted.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Hey, appreciate you joining me this early. Well, I guess it's early for me, right? Not so much on your end, because you're East Coast, right?
10 in the morning here, so
all right.
Not early at all.
All right, so a quick note before we get started. If anybody has any questions for Ted, go ahead and ask them in the chat, and the production crew, i.e. Amanda, over in the office, will message them to me, and we'll get to them at the end of the conversation. So let's get started as we do with every one of these. What got you started in board games, Ted?
Hey, I have loved and played board games ever since I was super young. It's one of those that I can't even remember the first time I played games. I have lots of fond memories of playing with both my father and my grandfather. Lots of one-on-one games. I know my grandfather was a huge fan of the board game Masterpiece, if you remember that Parker Brothers game. And so that was, I don't remember, I have not played it in 30, 40 years probably, but we played it two-player and we played it a lot. And that's one of my fondest memories. It's the basement of my grandparents' house and sitting across the table playing Masterpiece with my grandfather, and as well as a lot of other games, Crazy Eights and just all sorts of things that we would play. But those are really fond memories, and just always a gamer. As a kid, you don't think of yourself as a gamer, you just think of yourself that you like playing games, and that's just one of the things you do, right? And so as all kids everywhere that play games, that was me, playing all sorts of the games that were out there, and played D&D in high school and in college, and of course video games at the same time. And that never lost the passion for that, and always enjoyed playing games. So
what made the transition then from like you said, Mastermind and all of those to what we consider designer or hobby games?
So I think for me, it was, I started doing some design work for games. I really wasn't thinking about being a game designer. It was more of, gee, I really wish there was a game that did this or did that or something. And that was before I really started playing any Euro games or any kind of more modern type games. It was mostly at that point, all the classics as well as party games. And occasionally I'd end up playing some things that, some Steve Jackson games or some of the games from James Ernest that he put out, those sorts of games. And very slowly, I found my way into the hobby. And the thing that did it for me actually is I wanted a copy of Illuminati, and I could not find a copy of Illuminati anywhere. I went to the mall, had a game store, of course, and I asked a guy, I'm like, why don't you have one on your shelf? We have all these other weird games I've never heard of. Why don't you have this? And then he's like, I can order it for you, which was cool because at the time the internet was sketchier, I guess, than it is.
Sure.
And so I'm like, that's cool. And then he said, while you're waiting for that, you might want to try some of these. And so
the salesman.
Yeah, and it was awesome because there was Catan, there was just a bunch of other games that I hadn't heard of, and of course Catan, when you walk past it in the store, I mean, even now I'm just surprised that 20 years or so after I saw it for the first time, it's still a really unpleasant looking box overall. It does not have a lot of shelf appeal.
It doesn't pop off the shelf, does it?
No, not at all. And I had not heard of Settlers before this guy told me about it, and I was like, I don't know. And he goes, "This is the one. You'll play this a couple times, and then you won't want to stop." And I'm like, that seems weird. But he seemed like, other than that, he seemed like a reasonable person. So I grabbed a copy. I learned it from the rules, which is pretty much a terrible thing to do because it's a bizarre rule book. It's like in 2 pieces and stuff. I don't know how many people actually do that. But yeah, he was right, and we played the crap out of it. And then of course I went back. I'm like, what else is like this? And then not long thereafter, we found all the other places on the internet that have games, and got into BGG and all sorts of things. And then I was, my eyes were just like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And like anyone else new to the hobby that's so excited about it, you buy as much as you can, as fast as you can. And then you're kind of learning what you like and what you don't like at that point too. So yeah, I was certainly at that point, I was definitely skewed towards the heavier stuff. The roads and boats types of stuff, Tigris and Euphrates, those sorts of games were the things that really appealed to me back in the day.
And then from there, obviously, you found Age of Steam.
Yes, I did. I was going to this Monday night game group that was being hosted at the Yahoo campus. I lived in the Bay Area, and at Yahoo, they still do this as far as I know. Every Monday night in the cafeteria, they host a game night there, and it's maybe 10, 15 people.
That's
and
cool.
I went there, and yeah, it was great because I got to play games with a bunch of people, and they're all gamers, and they had other stuff I didn't heard of, and it's a really good way to see a lot of actual German games from Germany that you don't really have access to otherwise. And one of the games, right when Age of Steam came out, someone brought it, and we started playing that, and just with that first base map, we were hooked. We're like, okay, this is cool. And there's something about Age of Steam, about the way that it punishes you and punishes you and punishes you, and there's a gleam of hope somewhere at the end that you're just trying, just like, please let me break even, please let me break even. When you do, that is one of the most exciting things in gaming, when you do not owe money on a turn.
Yes,
and,
I'm finally in the black, or at least
yes.
not in the red. Yes,
right. And if you've done that without taking all of your shares, and if it's such a great feeling. And especially when you're not paying money, and then someone else is going, I owe $4, or whatever it is, and that was pretty exciting. So I mean, I absolutely loved Age of Steam. I started purchasing all the Warfrog maps that Martin had done, all the other ones that he had done, and of course at that point that was it. I mean, there was a couple that he had put out at that point, and nothing else. And so right away I was like, I know how to use Adobe Illustrator. Actually worked at Adobe at the time, and I was the group product manager for Illustrator. So not only did I know how to use it, I had access to it and the latest versions of it. So that was
nice
and I had
perk.
access to big printers at Adobe. They had big printers for testing, like big plot printers for testing. I didn't really ever mention that to them, but I don't think they care now. So I could actually print things that were like in one piece, which is pretty cool.
Nice. So that's how you, and I'm surprised, but maybe I shouldn't be, but how many designers out there got their feet wet designing Age of Steam maps?
There's probably, even if they haven't done it commercially, it's a great way to start, because it's got this, it's a really nice environment. It's got a great world to start with, and there's all sorts of rules that you can tweak and break and still make the game work. And it's kind of as far as I'm concerned, it was a great training ground for me to understand, what these changes do. Like every little change, how it implicate, how it just totally changed the way people would play, or the different actions and what their values were. And that was great. The dozens of Age of Steam maps that I designed, and a lot of them ended up getting printed. I think those are the great training ground for understanding game design, and just in a kind of a very small, piecemeal, focused way.
To where you're only focused on this one little thing, and then kind of a butterfly effect. Oh, this little change, how it kind of ripples out across the entire game.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything from just changing the cost of an action, or changing the way bidding was structured, or how much tiles cost, all those things, and give great credit to both John Bohr and Martin Wallace, because what they did with Age of Steam is they balanced it just so well. So it really is. It's older now, but it really is. It is a pristinely balanced game, and a lot of people would disagree because they're like, "Oh, that's not fair. It's too punishing." It's on purpose that it's punishing, because of what we were talking about earlier. It just makes you feel so good to get to that point, and it's designed that you can get there for the most part. Some of the maps not so much, but on most of those maps you will be able to get income towards the end, and that's just very satisfying when it happens. And just crusting that little hill is awesome.
Which is funny coming from you, seeing as you have designed what is arguably thought of as the toughest, most brutal Age of Steam map in existence, which is the Bay Area.
That was actually the first one that I did too. Yeah.
Go as hard as you can. So
Yeah.
what possessed you to, you know what? The game's not punishing enough. Let me really hate on everybody.
Yeah, I think it was, we played, I think it was the England and Ireland map, which is a great three-player map that Martin had done at one point. And, that's one of those that if you make a mistake early on, you can be in a lot of trouble. And there's a few others that were like that. And, I love that challenge, both as a game designer and as a player, of the most difficult thing possible. Yes, there's a way around it. It's not impossible, but it's so close. It's if you screw up, if you make the wrong decision early on, you're totally hosed. And in general, in game design, that's probably a bad idea. You don't want to punish people for making mistakes early in the game. But for something you're going to play again and again and again, like I was doing that. So, for me, I actually thought that was kind of cool because that had a lot of replay value with it.
All right. So okay, sticking with the Age of Steam maps, because as you said, you've designed dozens of them. How did you, for those that are geographically relevant, not the beer and pretzels or so on and so forth, the ones that are actually based on a real world location, how did you go about balancing between the geography or geographic accuracy and gameplay balance? How did you make those trade-offs?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always gameplays first. And people are upset that one city is too close to something else, or this is the wrong shape of something. Okay, that's just how it is. Because really, it's not worth it to mimic geography exactly if the game is not going to be good in the end. If there's a problem with it, or something's too easy, or it's broken, or whatever. It's why the particular cities on the Rust Belt map for Age of Steam have those cities in place and not other ones. It's because they're balanced and they're the right distance apart. That's one of those things that you learn. And certainly there were a bunch of maps that were done on different things. I think I had at one point Railways of the World, and it was a world map, and it just didn't work. And there's no way to make it work without really skewering the way the Earth looked. There's a bunch of examples like that where and that's, I think, some of them ended up being kind of what you're saying, kind of the more abstract, non-geographical maps, because they started as something, Portugal or something, and they're like, well, this is not going to work. Well, Portugal has like one drain or something too that didn't help in like only a couple cities, but a lot of the maps ended up slowly transforming from that geographic location to something else. Certainly, one of my favorites is the Disco Inferno one, which is kind of a weird theme, but originally
one of my all-time favorite maps, by the way. Yes.
That's nice. I don't remember what the geographical location was originally, but it was pretty soon that as I was working on that I realized this is just not going to work. And when, for whatever reason, I have no idea what type of state of mind I was in to have that particular theme come up, when that hit, and I was like, oh my gosh, now we can do this. And then if we take that Disco Inferno song and take a couple of those really cool lyrics from it, we can actually make those into actions and have certain things happen. I mean, the whole thing about, burn it down to the ground when your cities burn after all the cubes are out, and just fun stuff like that. And then, with playtesting, one of my favorite rules in there, which I know a lot of people don't like, but which
I love it. This is fantastic.
There's one you're not allowed to hum or sing any songs during the thing, or you lose a point. You basically lose one right then. You're like, and people are like, that's not fair. And I'm like, no, it's actually really good, because it kind of has this weird focus, because you're constantly seeing all these names of these songs, and most people know, and they're like, oh yeah, and they'll learn from it. And like, nope, remember what we said? That's a point. It's like, no, I'm like, that's the rules.
No, we have had many a good laugh over that map, as well as on the other side, the Soul Train. Just the fact that you cannot hum, and what we'll do to make it worse whenever we play Disco Inferno is we'll throw on Spotify or something and put on a disco soundtrack just to make it impossible to not hum or sing along while playing that. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Soul Train is arguably, that and Alban Viard's Moon are my personal two favorite Age of Steam maps out of everything that I played. So
yeah,
I think both the theme of Soul Train and the way that the map switches from hell to earth, or purgatory up to heaven. I think that was really, really clever, really well done. So thank you for that.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So before we move on from Age of Steam, I know your current thoughts on the game, which you can expound on for everybody, but what do you think about the sheer quantity of maps out there? Do you feel like it's just about right? Do you think it's too many? Or do you think there's still more that can be explored, albeit possibly from somebody else?
I think there's a lot of space still to explore in that area. I don't think that it has been overdone. I know people would say there are dozens of commercial maps as well as probably hundreds of PnP ones that people have done, and there's other. I mean, when you see someone post something, and again, I haven't paid attention to it much recently, but certainly by the time I was done, there's still people putting out stuff with all sorts of really unique and innovative mechanics in it. And I think there's just a lot you can do with the space still. I think if anything else, and what you're referring to is it's just a little Age of Steam burnout for the most part after playing countless games. I don't know how many hundreds, maybe not 1,000, but hundreds and hundreds of games. It takes its toll after a while.
Sure,
like, okay,
to be expected.
I don't play enough. Whenever I do play, every once in a while that I play, I get totally reamed by whoever I'm playing with, because they tend to be like, Ted, you're here. You want to play this map? And whether it's one of mine or someone else, doesn't matter. I do not do well, because you've got to kind of get back into that whole thought process of being able to think, a few steps ahead and where you're going to be and what you need to do. And my brain has not been in that particular mode for Age of Steam for a while now. So probably fun to get back into it at some point, but it's a time issue more than anything else. Probably so many new games.
Fair enough. All right. So the one question that I would be skewered if I did not ask, so forgive me for asking it, but I have to. So you already kind of touched on whether or not you would ever revisit, so there's that. But maybe the bigger question, that especially since we do a lot of playthroughs of various out-of-print Age of Steam maps, because, well, it's one of our favorite games and people really enjoy seeing some of the more obscure maps that are out there. Have you ever considered possibly reprinting or making available some of the older maps that either you or Bezier in general have published?
Yeah, so people ask that a lot, especially for the real older ones like Bay Area, Disco Inferno, Soul Train.
Right.
The ones that I published for JCLR and Sun in London, those were very popular. And the answer is really it's just a matter of economics. It's game boards are the most expensive component of pretty much any game outside of a big box full of miniatures, and so it just costs a lot. I mean, the prices that I was charging for those maps, I kind of had to do because I was doing such low print quantities at the time, and the prices have not gotten any better at this point. So it is really unlikely.
Okay.
It's kind of sad because I think, especially Disco Inferno and Soul Train, they seem like they would benefit from having a real printed, hardbound version of those. And of course, everyone wants Bay Area too, because it's not available. But I think that's part of why they wanted to, is because it's not available. If it's available,
Sure,
I don't know if it would be quite as popular than the 50 or so copies that were originally printed.
Well, maybe we can get a grassroots effort together, and if there's a big enough demand, maybe we can work something there.
Well, there you go. I don't know.
All right, so you have designed a huge variety of games, from light social deduction to the aforementioned Age of Steam maps. So what do you find most challenging, the one aspect or aspects of designing games?
The most challenging thing, I think, is playtesting enough. I think it is probably one of the most critical things that designers and publishers can do, is a tremendous amount of playtesting and finding unique players to play test things the first time and seeing what the responses are, getting people to play again and again and again on different designs. A lot of hours goes into playtesting. The Age of Steam maps that I did, I mean, my friends, there's a core group of people, probably 7 or 8 folks in the Bay Area, that I don't know if they dislike or hate me at this point, but I'm sure they are sick of playing Age of Steam to death because I kind of like, hey, got a new map, and they're like, oh my god, seriously.
Oh, yay, another
Uh,
map. All right,
yeah.
awesome.
So, but it had to be done. It's one of those things like you can come up with any game designer or anyone who's not even designing games, just thinking about them, picking up with, oh, this would be cool if it did this and this and this, and you think that through, and in your head it all works, and then you put it down, and your first self-test, things go horribly wrong. But even when things on the self-test go right, and it seems like they make sense, and when you take it, you put it in front of real live game players, then you realize, oh, okay, this does not work as I expected, or this is a little fiddly or clumsy, or I can see that people are getting fidgety because they're a little bored in this particular area, and a lot of that stuff really goes away if you play test enough and figure out how to address those things. Or in some cases, many cases, the hundreds of games that I have that are not published, you just realize, well, there's nothing I can think of to fix that right now, so it goes away, and maybe it'll come back. Some of them, they're like tugging at me, like, please come back, we think you can fix this, it's really cool.
You walk into the room and they're like, pick me, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. But yeah, again, I think it's playtesting. Playtesting takes a lot of time. It's one of the first people that I played games with was Matt Leacock. He used to go to that same Monday night group, and
quite the Yahoo group.
Yeah, he actually worked at Yahoo. So yeah, Tom Lehman would go there occasionally. Probably some other designers I'm not thinking of right now. Sorry if I'm forgetting you guys. But Matt brought a Pandemic and a few other games to do playtests. And Matt was a UI designer at Yahoo, so he's already thinking about how people interact with things, and that was kind of his focus. And he would take ridiculous, copious notes on everything that was happening in a playtest, much more so than I did. And I was always very impressed with that. And I think that's one of the reasons you'll see in his games that, they're certainly not heavier games, but the stuff that he's done, everything is polished. It works. There's no, people don't go, Pandemic's good except for this little aspect, unless you don't like co-op games.
Right, sure.
Anyway, but it's that sort of thing that you can tell that, stuff before he even brought it to a publisher and got it published, he had play tested as much as he could and made it as good as possible before it even got there. And that's I think something that I love to see whenever I get a game from a designer and it's pitched to me as a publisher. If they've play tested a lot, you can tell, usually in the first couple of minutes of playing the game, you can kind of tell, like, wow, they've actually thought these things through, and it kind of all works. And there's no weird little hiccups and, oh, well, maybe because you started with that card, that's why I did that, or whatever. They've run through all those scenarios already, and they've addressed them as best as they could. And doing that as a game designer is absolutely huge, and it's time consuming, and it's hard work. And it's one of the reasons right now why people are still waiting for Ultimate Werewolf Legacy, which we announced like a year ago, because playtesting for that has been brutal. You've got to get a ton of people together, and the games are at least an hour long, and we usually are actually setting them up so they play 3 games in a row, and making a change. Now that I've learned about legacy games, you make one little change and it basically wrecks everything else.
Right, butterfly effect, right?
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah. Rob Davio, when we first started working on that, I was like, we can crank this out in a couple months, right? You got this legacy thing down.
He's like, oh, that's cute. That's cute, Ted.
And he's like, it's possible, I guess, but I think you might, change your expectations there a little bit. And I was like, we got this, Rob. It's fine. And so we're still working on things, although it's really close. I'm very excited about it. But boy, playtesting for that has been super important, but also that's brutal.
So, okay, on that note then, let's go down that road a little bit. As a publisher, and as a designer, so wearing either or both hats, how do you determine, okay, it's been play tested, quote unquote, enough? How do you make that determination?
Usually it's, I walk away from a couple playtest sessions in a row and I really can't think of anything that makes sense to change. Playtesters will always come up with something like, hey, what if you did this? Or what if you did this? And sometimes those are valid things. Other times you kind of have to put in perspective and think, why did they say that? What's really at the core of this? And, just recently, some of the games that are coming out right now, Whistle Stop, Palace, Werewords, all of those were playtested up to a point where suddenly there was no point in playtesting anymore. And I actually felt like, if I playtested this more, it would just be to play, which is fine. And that's enjoyable to play with the final rules. But at that point, you realize, we're done. We're ready to go, and we can do some other things like the final blind rules playtesting and a few of those other things. But yeah, there's certainly a sense that you get, like, this is as good as it's going to get, and hopefully it's going to be awesome and everyone's going to love it. Some cases that's the case. Some cases it doesn't stick. But at least I feel pretty confident that pretty much all the games that we've published, I felt they were done. They were ready to be published. They didn't need something else. You don't need an expansion to make them work properly. That sort of thing. I think a great example of that is, I'm forgetting the name of it. The one dice game is the word king in it. King's Forge? No, that's not it.
Help me out here. What now? With
it's a
dice
game. It's you're placing your dice on the board. Probably look it up and find it pretty quickly. But King's starts with king.
Not King's Will, is it?
No. No, I'm not going to find it here. Anyway, there's an expansion that you have with it that basically fixes one of the big issues in the game, and you have to play it with the expansion. There's a few games that are like that.
Sure.
There's an expansion. It solves a problem that went out with the game, and I kind of hate that. I mean, it's great when they do fix it. That's nice, but the fact that it's out there in the base game, you have to tell people, oh yeah, just make sure you play with this part of the expansion, or you're not going to have that much fun.
Yeah, that's less than ideal. Whenever a expansion becomes an essential part of the game, that kind of is a failing of the publisher and or designer? ?
And it's possible. And obviously, I think in that particular case, they felt that that was correct. That's the way to play it. And then I don't know if they had done that. The expansion was a result of feedback from the original game, or if that was something that was in the works, and they thought, no, you know what, we like it the other way better. But for me, it was one of those things that I felt, if you don't have the expansion, the game is less fun. And it was, I think you were using chits instead of dice for determining the strength of the bad guys that are coming in, or something like that at the end of each round.
Gotcha.
And it just kind of made the game playable and less frustrating for people. It really just changed it. So that's it.
Okay, yeah, a bunch of people in chat are mentioning Kingsburg. Yeah. So that kind of steals the thunder, I guess, of my all-time favorite question to ask every designer that I have on here is, how do you decide a game is done and it's time to put it to bed? Just when you're done playtesting and you can't think of anything else to change? Is that it then?
That is probably the closest to it, yeah. I mean, at that point where you play test and you're not getting responses back from people that are, and again, it's not just what they say, it's how they're playing the game, and the way that they interact with each other and with the game, and it just feels like that. Wow, this is it right here.
So
anything else is just going to be messing with things. And
so you really read body language as well in your players and everything, just how in tune with the game are they, or have they checked out, et cetera, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Last night, in fact, we're at a playtesting session for a new social deduction game. I know, shocker, that I'm working on. And,
we'll get there. We'll get there.
Why would you do that? And I could definitely tell that the majority of people they're playing, and they were having fun, but they were not having fun like I expected them to have. And at that point, then I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is the issue here? What is that thing that's missing? Why aren't they as engaged as I expect them to? And I mean, that's definitely you can ask them afterwards, did you enjoy it? They might say yes or whatever. And I always try to have them, just be honest. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I want you to tell me now, because what will hurt my feelings is if you post that remark after it's published. You don't tell me now. That's really bad.
Sure.
So I want to hear that. But
it's not positive feedback. It's honest feedback that helps you improve the game and makes for a better product, right?
Totally. I mean, even if someone says, I absolutely despise that, it was the least fun I've had playing a game, that's good feedback. That's good to know, because as a designer, you need to hear that stuff, and you want to hear it when you're playtesting. You always want to hear that negative stuff as soon as possible when you're playtesting. And people like games for subjective reasons. People will rate the best game. I'm sure a lot of people have rated Pandemic Legacy a 1, whether they are just doing it to be against the crowd, or just because they really hate the game. And that's understandable. It doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It means that it's just not there. Yes, it's a terrible game. And as a designer and publisher, that's still very hard. You're like, why don't you like this? How could this be? I think it's awesome. But at this point, I know that people think, well, this is no good, or it's luck based, or whatever. And the instinct is I want to send them a note and go, excuse me, but no, you're wrong. This is why you're wrong. Can't do that, because you're not going to convince them anyway. But in their mind,
arguing on the internet always works.
Yeah. I mean, there's one of my least favorite games in the world, and I should like it, is Brass. I don't know why. No, I know. It's not weird. Everyone always thinks, my wife loves it. My gaming friends all love it. When it came out, they played the crap out of it. I've played it 3 times, and I don't know what it is, but something about it just never clicked with me to the point where I just don't ever play it. I don't understand why, but that's just how it was. And
when the new version of Brass Birmingham, the changed, so it's when not Brass Lancashire, which is the brass when you get a chance to try Brass Birmingham, I wonder if because it's not static, it's an ever-changing setup. See if maybe that changes things. But
I feel bad. I missed out on a lot of fun gaming because I did not like that particular game. But like I said, that's it for me. That helped. The fact that I don't like that, and I know that most other people who like those types of games do, just helped me realize that regardless, if everyone if they like Suburbia and they like Castles, that does not mean they're going to like Palace, even though it has a similar overall feel to it. Then that's fine. That is totally understandable. And it would be great if everyone did, but it's very unrealistic to think that.
So, if everybody liked the same game, there would be one game, right?
Yeah. But it'd be awesome.
Oh, right. It'd be an amazing game. Yeah. All right, Ted. So one of my favorite questions to ask designers: who do you design for?
I first designed for me more than anyone else. I designed because this is a game that I want to play. It's maybe some people would think that's selfish, but for the most part, I am going to have to play this game literally hundreds of times, sometimes thousands of times. In the case like one night, I have played it thousands of times now. And if I don't like that game, that's a problem. You've got to absolutely love the game that you're working on. Every single game that I've published has been a game that at the time again, you rate your own games a 10 on BGG and everyone jumps on you and says, that's ridiculous. But that's pretty much how I feel. Now, in hindsight, I look back and go, okay, maybe this wasn't that great. But at the time I'm publishing it, that is the top of the list. It is the best game ever. I absolutely love that game. And that's got to be what it is. If I'm not going to go, there's, lots of people are doing co-op games, so maybe I should do a co-op game. Well, I don't actually like co-op games that much, so that's probably not going to be something I would be good at doing. I'd kind of have to force myself to do it, and I wouldn't enjoy it that much, and then I'd be demoing it, and that's never going to happen. So, pretty much every game that I publish, people can go, oh, well, that's the type of game that Ted likes. That's in both designing and publishing. So a good example of that, we just published New York Slice earlier this year from Jeff Allers, which is a redo of Piece of Cake. And Piece of Cake, I thought, was just awesome. It was elegant. I really liked the I Cut You Choose mechanism. I love San Marco. San Marco's, I think, an amazingly underrated game. Everyone should get a copy, even though it's hard to find now. It's one of those that I need to talk to Rob about, but doing for restoration, they need to do a revised, better graphics San Marco. That'd be fantastic. But I love Piece of Cake, and I was talking to Jeff and looking at some of his new prototypes, and he happened to mention that when Piece of Cake was available for redoing it, and I was like, oh my God, I love that game. I love that's a great way to get non-gamers introduced to gaming. And to be able to work directly with Jeff on that game and come up with some new stuff and to retheme it, that was awesome. That was exciting. I love pizza. It all worked out really well. I'm so happy with that game. I'm absolutely thrilled how it turned out and everything about it. And I hope that comes through for a lot of these games here, that, this is, we're not just going, oh, okay, it's done, we'll push it out. We're going, but no, there's definitely an intensity about the way we feel about these games when we're putting them out there.
That's really interesting to hear, because you don't always hear this, because let's face it, since you wear multiple hats, meaning publisher and designer, the fact that it's not just, okay, look, we have to pay the bills, but there's a legitimate passion in every single title that you publish. That's more. I don't know that I have got that from everybody that I've spoken to in this hobby. That's something different. So is that a luxury, do you feel like, to be able to be that passionate about every single title, as opposed to, I don't want to say mailing it in on certain titles, but you understand the sentiment.
I could list a bunch of my publisher friends that mailed it in. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if Monica is watching this, but
no, here, I'll wait. Go ahead.
There's, there's Michael over at Tasty Minstrel. I mean, they're just, they're like, hey, that looks good. Let's just send it out there. But, I feel that a lot of them, Stephen Bonacker is a great example. He loves those games he's publishing. He's handpicked those games, whether it's from a designer or whether he brings it over from Europe. And I know that those games he absolutely loves. And it's one of those things you can talk about with other publishers, that when a game does not perform up to your expectations, you're sad about it. You're not sad necessarily. I mean, the financial thing is always one thing. Like, yeah, of course it sucks that it didn't, couldn't go to a second printing. You couldn't make any more money. But, you feel like, wow, it could have had a better life out there. It could have been, it should have been more well received. It should have done better. And gee, why did people get it? The way that some of my playtesters and the way I felt about the game. So I think there actually is a lot of that. Small publishers, even the larger publishers. But certainly, Zev, when he was running Z-Man, I mean, he was excited. I mean, you could just see in his eyes he's excited about the new stuff. When he picked up Pandemic, when he got the license for Agricola, that's the sort of thing, and he's super excited about those things. He's like, oh my God, I get to publish this awesome game. And, I think a lot of people in the hobby are that way, and it may not always.
I would say the majority are that way, though. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's, we obviously love games, or we wouldn't be in this business. Most people that have a business degree, I have a marketing degree. Most people with a business degree don't come out of school going, you know what, I want to make a lot of money. The best way to do that is by starting a board game
publishing. Yes.
That's not the case, unfortunately. It'd be great if it was. We'd have even more games, but it is pretty low on the list, I think, of ways to make money fast. So you've got to be passionate about games, and hopefully about the games that you're publishing, in order for that to happen.
All right. So sticking on the design side, what interests you in a design? What excites Ted Alspach about designing a game? Is it a certain mechanism? Is it usually theme? Is it whatever hits you? What strikes you, and why?
Usually, it's mechanics. For me, it's mechanics first. I look at Knizia's games, the good stuff from the 90s and early. Not that some of the stuff he's done recently. No.
Let's be honest. Not everything is a massive hit.
Tigers and Euphrates, Amun-Re. I'm so happy that Tasty Minstrel put out an Amun-Re that doesn't have the chalky pieces, because those really irritated me before, and the pieces in the new one are great. So he was always about mechanics first. Even though I heard a couple interviews with him, and he said he did one with Scott and Dirk on BGG Geek Speak back in the day.
Way back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, back in mid 2000s, where he said that Tigers and Euphrates was theme first, and then he built a game around it. And I don't think he's lying, but I was so surprised, because that feels like such an abstract game in the way it works, and the fact that it was thematically that the theme came first was shocking. And I think a lot of the other things for him don't really. It seems he's a mathematician. I think he thinks along those lines about systems that work together, and
the math behind them, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and that's and I can definitely appreciate that, and that's certainly the mindset that I have. Is I want I like the way that things interact together. If you look at some of the older games that I did that aren't as popular, well, they aren't popular at all even. So there's two games that I still think just they would do better now if I published them now, as they did 10 years ago or whenever I published them. Rapscallion, which was you're trying to make the best poker hand by playing cards, and the system in which you do it, I'm still very, very happy with, because you have these bidding cards, and then use the bidding cards to get good poker cards, and then twice during that, while you're building up this hand of poker cards, you use the best poker card to try and get another good poker bidding card, so you can get better poker cards at the end.
So give and take as far as right.
It's balance between the two, and it's very, very cool. And it, of course, never took off, and it's a real old card game, whatever. But very, very happy with the way that it just makes me happy when that worked together. And the fact that with Suburbia, the balance between income and reputation, and how as you go up your population track, you get penalized every once in a while because you've got that overhead cost.
Right.
I'm very happy with how that turned out, and that sort of thing for me, that's the exciting stuff about games. When you're able to attach a theme to it, that makes a lot of sense. Or even if you're doing it with a theme in mind and that just ends up working, that's great. But definitely for me, it's figuring out what's that cool system or that cool interplay that gets people really engaged and interested. And like I said, if I'm not engaged and interested while I'm playing self-testing, then I know it's going to be a problem.
Is that the same place that you get your inspiration from, or is that something from a different aspect?
I think certainly a lot of the inspiration I've gotten is not from other games as much as other things that are tangential to that. So, for instance, Castles came about because
Castles being Castles of Mad King Ludwig for those
Castles
listening. Yep,
was originally based upon my love of drawing dungeons for Dungeons and Dragons. All the way through high school, I had
get
graph
that.
paper and just making those things and kind of like, what are people going to do, and how do these things interact with each other, and there's a secret passageway here, and this is all cool. And when you're done and you look at it, you're like, this is a cool looking dungeon. This is very cool. I can't do this table and piss off my friends. That's kind of where Castles came from, because it was like, it'd be cool to design that, or a house, or something along like a mansion. It was originally mansions. I don't remember what the name was, but it was about mansions. And when I brought on Dale Yu, the developer, and he suggested it be rethemed for King Ludwig, that was awesome. That was like, oh my gosh, it fits perfectly. And it actually added to some of the mechanics and the theme, and we were able to make it even better as a result. But for that, a lot of the interplay and the way it worked was mechanics first, and it was the things that kind of what I wanted to do with the game. For the upcoming Palace of Mad King Ludwig, it was originally going to be Castles, the card game, and as much as I wanted to publish Castles of Mad King Ludwig, the card game, which I was going to cleverly call Cards of Mad King Ludwig, because I thought it was
that's original.
Yeah, exactly. That was 2015 Ted. So he's not as bright as 2017 Ted. 2017 Ted's much more educated, much more aware of what's going on. But I really wanted it to be a card game, and the more I developed and worked on it, the more it was like, this is ridiculous. Why are we using cards? These should be tiles.
Meaning you're trying to shoehorn, kind of?
I didn't realize I was until at that point where I flipped over and said, you know what? If these were tiles, a lot of these things that were not quite working as well would work. And I'm like, oh, all right. And it was a little sad because that whole idea of a card game went away. Still have a couple other little things that they're working on for that. But,
so now it's the tiles of Mad King Ludwig.
There we go. There, that's clever.
So okay, so kind of on that note, and this is something that I'm always curious about. I feel like I'm the world's biggest 5-year-old. I always want to know the why and the how of behind things, and so it fascinates me being able to sit down with designers like yourself / publishers in this case. But how do you start on designing a game? You say that it's mechanics first, but are you sitting there playing a game and like, wow, that's kind of clever. Hey, I could use that in a new way? Or how do you even get started on this stuff?
It's a variety of things. There's triggers of some sort, usually something that is, I've read a book or seen something, or, clicking around on the internet, and you're like, wonder if that'll work. Just this morning, I was working on something. I was working on some upgrades for the WhereWords app and some word lists that we're integrating. And, I was wondering to myself, why in the world didn't I think of putting when I did the trivia game America, why I didn't use an app for all the cards instead of actually including physical cards in the box, because we could have done a lot more. It would have been a lot cheaper to produce. We would have sold more copies because it would have been cheaper because we charged less for it. All sorts of little things like that will trigger. And then, of course, then I'm thinking, well, maybe I should think about redoing that and talk to Freedom and see if he wants to, do a mobile version of Terra and Fauna and America, and see what that would be like. And so it's a variety of things that'll cause, that spark to start something.
So is it just literally you're going through your day and it just happens at random times to where you're just constantly subconsciously on the lookout for ideas?
I wouldn't say constantly, but certainly, like I said, when something hits where I'm like, that's interesting, where I wonder, oh, that would be cool. I need to jot it down as soon as possible, just make a little note of it. And then if it's something that I come back to, shortly, then I'll write what I call a concept sheet, which is, 1 or 2 pages of, this is how I think this game would work, and I just kind of do a quick list of what I imagine components would be and how many players would work and kind of the flow of the game, and maybe a few little details. And once I get that far, then it's, put that aside for a little, unless it's super awesome and I can't wait and I get back to it right away. But usually put that aside for a little, and then if it comes up again, I'm just thinking, I'm like, something else pops up for that, then it ends up turning into something that ends up being self-tested and hopefully play-tested and then eventually published. But a lot of things don't make it past those first couple steps. There's a lot of Word or Pages documents I have on my computer that are, a couple paragraphs of notes, and that's it. And a ton also that, again, are that full page and a half. It sounded really cool, and then as the more I started thinking about it or whatever, I was like, that's not really going to do it.
Okay, but it's stuff that can also trigger other things potentially down the road, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely things that I've worked on for games that haven't been published that have made it into games that were published, and that's a nice thing, because I've already thought about that particular system or those mechanics or something.
Okay. So do you impose any limitations within your own designs, whether it's the scope or the components, especially having a publisher hat on? Are you thinking about it, well, I don't want to make it this many chits or this many punch boards because that's going to add that much cost? Or are you just let the design go where it goes and then work backwards from there?
Sometimes I think, as the more I've been doing publishing now, I am thinking a little bit about those things. And when you get to things, the dice game, we published a couple games with dice, Favor the Pharaoh from Tom Lehman, and then Colony, which I worked on with a couple Japanese designers that had a previous design. And both games needed dice. In case of Favor the Pharaoh, it needed custom dice. In the case of Colony, it needed just a crap ton of dice, and they cost a lot of money. And it was one of those things like, well, that's how the game works. And both games were. They were good enough, and they were the types of games that I thought really deserved that, we're going to go forward with these, even though they're going to cost more money to produce and all the other things that go along with that. The custom dice, for instance, Favor of the Pharaoh has, I don't know, 6 or no, probably more than that, because there's a bunch of dice that have different numbers of pips on them. There's maybe 10 different custom dice that are part of that, as opposed to the regular dice that are with it. And of course, custom dice cost more than regular dice, and going to get really good dice because To Court the King didn't have the greatest dice, and people always substituted their own dice for that game, and so we went to fix that. And for me, it's really, does the game play really, really well? And if it does and it's unpublishable, that sucks. At some point I'll stop working on it as a result once I realize that. But that doesn't happen too often. I think there's not too many things that come out that way.
All right.
Certainly, being able to use an app for things for One Night and for WereWords, and if I had thought of it at one point for America, that would have made sense, or even Terra. But those things help, actually. For WereWords, to be able, the fact that we have this online thing where we have the app has thousands and thousands and thousands of words in these difficulty levels. Well, for cards, it would have cost so much money to put that in a box.
Whereas an app, just a couple more words spoken, right?
It costs money to develop it. It's not free, but it's a one-time cost, and you're done kind of at that point. We're going to keep upgrading for WereWords. We're going to add more stuff. But for One Night, for instance, the stuff that we did there for Alien, which it needs the app for, the development cost is done. It's ready to go. I play tested Alien, which needs an app because it does randomization. I play tested it with actual physical components, and it was gross because I had basically had to, shuffle a bunch of these different little cards and, come up with a different one each time. And to actually play that in analog fashion would have been horrendous. That would have been an unpublishable game had there not been an electronic solution for it. I think it's cool that there's other alternatives, but at the same time, there are some games that you get to that there really is no really good solution for, and to make the game work, it's just gonna cost too much. I like dexterity games. I've only published one of them, but I would love to publish more. But the ones I want to publish would cost way too much. They would, require an immense amount of wood or plastic or something, and it just doesn't make any sense.
So talking about apps, obviously you are a big proponent of using apps in games. How did that come to be, and where do you see that going down the road, just in general, across the entire board game hobby?
I mean, I think of it as just another component, just like cards, dice, anything else, game boards. And I think it should be viewed that way. And it shouldn't be, there should never be a thing where someone goes, I want to create an app-based game. And I certainly would never think, I want a game that requires an app, because that's kind of a weird way to start. There's a designer friend of mine that actually pitched me a game at Gen Con that has an app that is not required, but it enhances the game a lot. And that's the sort of thing where I think really is, if theoretically you could do the game without the app, but the app just makes the game so much better, well, then that's kind of cool. And that's where it makes sense to have an app. In general, I think it's totally fine. Smartphones are ubiquitous. Most all gamers have them. Games that require each person to have their own phone. I think I forget if Alchemist required everyone to have their own phone, or if you could share one for that.
I think you could.
Remembering.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember as well. I've played it a few times.
But
I think it made it easier, if nothing else.
You could do it otherwise, but it was kind of a little clunky sort of thing. And I think that was they marketed it more of like, yeah, there's this cool app that does this, which was cool. It was kind of cool to be able to scan stuff and figure that out. But it was the idea that it could be played otherwise. That's good. That's they weren't requiring you to get an app, and I don't think they went into that doing that. It's just a deduction game would had a lot of things going on, and that way you don't have to have some secret chart. And one of the big things with deduction games is without a moderator or someone that knows everything that's going on, you somehow have to get to that hidden information in a way that doesn't break the game.
Right.
And an app is a way to do that, which is kind of neat.
So on that note, though, what would you say to folks that are, I hesitate to use the word scared, but of concerned about an app not being updated, not being able to be compatible 5 years, 10 years from now, whereas cardboard doesn't change. Cardboard's cardboard.
Yeah, definitely. So we have, I don't know, like 7 or 8 different apps that we've put out for setup apps and things for different games. And one of them that we hadn't touched for a while was the timer for Ultimate Werewolf, which is a timer app, and it's a fairly complex timer app. So it lets the moderator do a bunch of things so that they can make the games go faster. And we hadn't updated it for a while, and it was totally incompatible with iOS 11. So we've just updated that. Actually, the update should be popping up any day now on there. But it's something that, the more apps we have, there's an upkeep cost to that going forward. And, some games that are older, if it's a setup app, we did a setup app for Colony and for Favor the Pharaoh. That's not critical because you don't really need that. It's nice. For One Night, you absolutely need to have it. For Werewords, you absolutely need to have it. So those we need to keep updated, and we will until, far in the future, hopefully, when the game stops selling at some point, that we can consider not updating it. But for, the next 5 years at least, we are kind of chained to that. And, it's kind of our responsibility as a publisher to make sure that is working with, as many devices as possible. Certainly when new ones are coming out, thanks Apple, we have to make sure that they work. So.
Well, it's good to hear that a publisher sees that as a responsibility and not just, hey, sorry, we put it out there. It worked when we put it out there, and that's that. So that you're willing to stand by your product for at least a certain amount of time, the foreseeable future, as it were.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. But it is one of those things to consider if you're using an app as part of your game and how integral the app is. That you're going to need to really support that because it's great. Right now, I can take a copy of a game that was pretty like modern art, and I can play it because, hey, everything's there. There's no dependencies on what the technology was back in 1992 or whenever that was published. And to take a game of One Night from now, 20 years from now, and not be able to play it because there's no devices that support the app anymore, that's a problem. That kind of sucks. That game's kind of dead and lost at that point. So, it's certainly a responsibility and, something that we're going to have to keep in mind going forward with the different apps that we have.
All right. So I read about how you chose regular sided dice for Colony as opposed to custom dice for a functionality standpoint. So where do you put the priority as far as form versus function, or vice versa?
I think most people would realize that they look at our games. Our games tend not to be overly graphically beautiful, I guess is the nice way to put it. Other people will
information
put other
forward, right? It's information forward, so function over form, which
function
is the
first.
Most important thing, right?
In my mind, yes. And I think people who play, I would think basically a lot of the people who are watching this right now and listening to this, they are probably a little bit more towards that camp. Splatter games, I love splatter games. The guy, Jerome, who runs that, he's fantastic. He's a super great guy. He loves his stuff. And his games aren't ugly. Well, the older ones are a little ugly, but the newer stuff's not ugly at all.
Fair enough.
And the thing is, that's what he cares about. He wants to have that amazing interactive, those mechanics that just flow together really well. And if graphics or the components got in the way of that, if he put miniatures in his game, I don't really think Roads and Boats would be better with miniatures. Okay, it would be a little better, but it wouldn't be a lot better. It wouldn't make people who don't play Roads and Boats now play Roads and Boats, because now you got miniatures instead of pieces of wood to represent your donkeys and things.
Right.
So
I'm trying to picture Roads and Boats with minis right now.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, think about it. That's it's too bad there's not enough copies out there. We could get the Meeple Source folks to at least do some really cool Meeples for Roads and Boats.
That would be very much a niche market, but
the thing is, the people who run Meeple Source, Cynthia and Chris Landon, they love their heavy games, so it's not out of the question.
That is true. I've talked with them enough to know that, so it's possible. I mean, something we could talk to Jeroen about.
Yeah.
So how do you feel that you have grown as a designer since you started way back in the day, back in the 90s? Well, 90s, 2000s, but
yeah, I'm a publisher as well, and I think certainly when I was doing designs back when I first started designing any games, like party games and kind of not good games, I was not thinking really a lot about how other people would interact with each other as much, and how things that just overall there's just a lot of other things that are going in my head, like how long does this take. The first games I designed, I really didn't care. It was I want a great game, and if it takes 3 hours to play, it takes 3 hours to play. Now I realize that, well, that's nice, but very few people will play a 3-hour game, unfortunately. That's just not
we're growing. There are more and more out there that are going that way.
There are, but still, a 3-hour game is a tough sell, unfortunately. As much as I enjoy the occasional game of Democker, I also realize that I'm not going to play it more than a couple times a year, because it's as long as it is.
Fair enough.
And other games that are like that. So I think a lot of those sorts of considerations, the complexity in terms of the upfront complexity is something that I didn't used to consider, and I consider that a lot now. And I think you'll see that in a lot of Bezier games is that we try to keep the rules as small and tight as possible, and let you discover a lot of the things how to play, as you play the game, and things that are on the tiles or things that are on the cards. And that's what kind of enhances the gameplay, and you don't really have to learn this much upfront, because that's a huge roadblock, certainly for getting new gamers into the hobby. I know you tell someone, the rules are going to take about 25-30 minutes, and their eyes will glaze over. Other people are like, oh, cool, there's all sorts of great stuff here for me to dig into. But I realize that the majority of people are not like that, and they want 10-15 minutes at the most.
So on that note, do you see that as your job, kind of as Bezier Games, to cater to bringing new people into the hobby? Then what is the kind of transitioning into the publishing side now then? What do you see as the brand identity then for Bezier Games?
I think for us, certainly, we've been really fortunate. There's a couple titles that have done really well, and they've done well outside of hobby gamers. Hobby gamers, certainly, Castles and Suburbia, hobby gamers really enjoy, and that's awesome. But Castles in particular has done really well for a strategy game in non-hobby game areas. A lot of people refer it, it's a good spouse game. It's a go-to spouse game that if you're a gamer and your spouse isn't, she'll actually play Castles with you for a variety of reasons. There's this sounds really terrible. I'm sure people will be offended, but there's the shopping aspect. There's something about that I think attracts non-gamers to, hey, there's cool stuff I can buy. I can get things that are better. There's values I place on things.
Yeah, and I think that's unisex. I don't feel like that's one or the other. I think people
But it's
enjoy
for
buying
non-gamers,
stuff.
I
Sure.
guess,
Yeah.
is the thing is non-gamers can appreciate that. It's like, I'm getting a deal here. I'm getting a really good value for what I'm paying for something. There's something about that. I think that's goes beyond gaming, that people just like that sort of thing. People like, after they're done creating something, to look back and go, oh, that's kind of cool. That's in suburbia. That's Detroit in the 90s, or whatever. And there's something about that that's appeals to the non-gamer. And so a couple of our games that have done that, that's awesome. That's fantastic. And then, some of the social deduction games have also gone beyond the typical gamer. One Night, I don't know where it's ranked on BGG now, probably in the 200s or something. But
I
that's
think it
our
was
best
201 last I looked. I think so.
Okay.
Something like that.
It's not rated as the ratings aren't as high. There's a lot of people that do rate it, but the ratings aren't as high as some of the other games. But it's our best-selling game because I think a lot of people who don't go to BGG like playing the game. They play it with their friends and family, and you can play it with non-gamers, and that's kind of cool. And when I'm at a Gen Con or something else, and someone walks up to the booth and they're just excited to say, and they actually come up and they just say, hey, I just want to thank you for this because now my friends or my family or my mom or whatever plays this game with us, and we didn't do that before. That's awesome. That
cool. Feels amazing. I'm sure
that is one of the nicest things that you can possibly hear from people. And I love hearing that. I get occasionally get notes from people. I have on my desk here, I have a handwritten letter that someone sent me that was, I don't know how old they are because they did not say it, but it was a kid of some sort, basically saying how much they loved One Night. Here's a bunch of ideas for roles. They don't want any money. They just want to, if they use the ideas, to give them credit. And they're just so excited about the game, and they absolutely love it. And that sort of thing is awesome. That's sort of those things that, that undoes all those nasty little Reddit comments and the one ratings with utter garbage comments from people, that just wipes those away, because that's made a difference in some people's lives in terms of they spend a lot of time with these games and they really, really enjoy them, or they've gotten a spouse to play a game that hadn't before,
and that wasn't willing, and they found a commonality there. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great for both people in the relationship. Then the gamer gets to do something with his wife that he didn't think he'd be able to do before, or her husband, and vice versa, that suddenly they're spending time together doing something and that they're both enjoying. And it's not kind of like, yeah, I'll do this for you because, we should do stuff together and I know it's your thing and I'll just, I'll suffer through it. But
right.
if they're really
the
enjoying
pity
it,
play, yes.
Yeah. So that's very cool. That's awesome.
It is. Even though we are in different aspects of this hobby, I can relate to that last bit you said, to where, when you hear those impacts, that what it is that you've created has an impact on somebody, it tends to help offset some of the less nice things that can be said. Yeah, totally. I mean, because we're human, right?
It's so easy to say stuff on the internet too. Just an offhand comment that's
that cuts. Yes.
But the in-person stuff, when someone says something nice, that's just awesome. And
it really is.
This particular Gen Con, I don't know if there were a lot of new attendees or whatever, but there was a lot of that, and it was just it floored me. I mean, there were a couple that are like, that was the nicest thing. I'm like, I just want to go home now. I'm done. It's great that everything else is doing well with the business, but that is so cool.
Yes, that feels really good. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
So how do you go about, again, putting your publisher hat on, how do you go about selecting the games that you, Ted, did not design? Because earlier you had mentioned how whenever people present games to you, you can tell whether or not a game has been polished, if you will, or at least play tested enough to where they have thought about certain aspects. Does that help get a game into Bezier, or is it just, it depends on how much time you're willing to put into a game? How does that selection process work for you?
It helps tremendously. I mean, it's so it's a good example. So at Essen, I only saw two designers, Mark Garrett's, who just published Mini Rails, and
which is phenomenal, by the way.
We'll talk about that in a second. So I talked to him, and I also talked to Jeremy Kletzkind, who is the designer of Werebeast, which we're publishing. We have a Kickstarter up for that now.
Yep.
And those are the only people I talked to, because they had these pitches that they talked to me. I hadn't met either of them in person before. I knew of Mark's work, and Jeremy's fairly new. He's got some designs now, but he hadn't had any before. But they pitched us. They don't really pitch me. They pitched the company, and then some things get filtered to me if it makes sense. But it was really clear. It was, here's some games that we think you might be interested in, and here's why. Super succinct, to the point. The one for Werebeasts was just on target. It was just spot on. Like, that makes sense. He's actually thought through this, that this is a game that he could see in our catalog, and he told me why. And when I saw the game, when he showed it to me, we played it with 3 players, which at that time was a terrible number to play with. It was the worst possible number. It was a game from 3 to 10, and the sweet spot was 5 or 6 at that point when he was showing it to me. But I still understood what the game was and what he had done with it, and why it was going to be, why it could be a really good game possibly at that. So it's one I took back, and we made him an offer probably within a week or two of Essen, and we signed that. So talk real quickly about Mark Garrett's game. The game was Mini Rails. I think it was originally Chattanooga Choo Choo was the prototype name. So he showed me a couple games, and one of them was that. And we play tested that a lot. We play tested that several times. We passed on it, and we passed on it because, not because we didn't think it was a good game, but because we didn't see how it could possibly be a Bezier game. It did not fit with our particular line of games. So, if you look at our games, with the exception of New York Slice, which is kind of in the middle of things, we've kind of had the social deduction, smaller box games, and we have the larger strategy games, a couple party games there and there. But it didn't feel, I didn't think it was appropriate to add anything to the game to make it a bigger box game, something that would take 45 minutes to an hour minimum, up to an hour and a half, because the game itself really is 20 to 30 minutes right now.
Right.
It was such a clean, elegant design that, it was, again, like, should we make the exception and go for this? And I was like, you know what? It doesn't make sense. I think it actually, for us to do this, we wouldn't be able to add anything to it. And there's probably other publishers that may make this better. They would probably enhance the graphics, which is, the Mini Rails result. They made the board is beautiful. The gameplay is essentially the same. I don't know how much has changed from the thing, but very, very little from what he presented. So it was actually final. But that's the sort of thing that we saw that game, and we're like, this is a really good game. And in fact, my notes, I looked at them not that long ago when I saw that Mini Rails was being published. I just looked at my notes, what I sent back to Mark about it, and it was, one of the notes was, this is going to get published by someone. It's not going to be us, but someone is definitely going to publish this thing. I just told him why we wouldn't be able to do it. And there were 2 little things that we found with the game that were, things that we thought we had to work on. And that was it. That was kind of one of those things. But it was still, one of those things, like, it's great to get designers to give you games that are, it was really 95% done. It was clearly play tested. He had thought about how things interact, different player counts, what issues were. There's a beginning turn and end turn issue that are mostly resolved, I believe, in Mini Rails, in terms of, sometimes the last thing you do is kind of a cookie cutter, it's just automatic, it's going to happen. And your starting thing didn't seem as impactful. And I think those are addressed a little bit now with the published version. So, anyway, it's kind of cool seeing that stuff when it comes in, and the more playtesting and the more polished it is when it comes in there, that helps a lot, because
that's less time you have to spend with it, right?
Well, yeah, it's not the time. It's I don't want to undo someone's work, redo it. If for instance, it's one thing for, like, myself and Tom Lehman. I mean, when we sat down and we talked about what we could do to Court the King better, and he had some expansions, and we talked about different things that, there were issues with the original To Court the King that we wanted to address, and what else we could do. And that's a little different, as opposed to Tom giving me a final version of what became Favor the Pharaoh and saying, do you want to publish this? So that part I enjoy. Same thing with Scott Caputo. Scott Caputo showed a whistle stop really early on, when it was this weird Hindu carrying something up mountains game. He was very straightforward, and he's saying, it needs some stuff here and there, but he would like, he thought it might work for us, and it would be something to be interested in working with him on. That's different. And it's also, Scott and Tom are people that I've known for a long time, and so I'm comfortable knowing that, okay, I could probably work with them. Whereas, some designer that I don't actually know to a little, more sketchy as in, will this actually work? So I don't mind spending the time, but from a new designer that you're not aware of, then it's not as clear, and I kind of don't want to develop the game so much that their original game is lost, because they hadn't gone through some of those motions.
So something that you just said, I'm curious about how, as a publisher, you make the delineation between how do you decide this is X is going to be in an expansion and versus, we should include this in the base game.
To me, there's certain things. Suburbia is a great example. We ended up publishing 2 expansions for that so far. And the base game it's the right stuff in there. There was talk at the time, and some people would probably wish that I had, of taking out the casino and the PR firm and making those part of an expansion set because they were possibly too powerful. But at the end of the day, in playtests, I still feel very strongly they belong in the base game. That they provide this. It's kind of that extra strategy that if you're aiming for all game long and it hits, the PR firm comes out at the beginning of the C stack, you are in great shape and you're going to have a really good chance of winning. But if it doesn't, you're probably screwed because of the way you set up, your board and everything at that point. And it just added that extra layer of strategy that made sense.
To give a different path that people could shoot for. Right.
And knowing that that's there, one of the things people don't talk about as much, there's the recycling center, which is one that gives you a reputation for a bunch of your yellow tiles. And some people, and myself included, as you're playing, you may set up a thing, basically a 6 hex thing of yellow tiles, hoping that recycling center comes out, because when it does, boom, you're going to pop it right in the center and you're going to go up 12 reputation just from one tile. And that by itself is huge, and it's cheaper than the PR firm. And it's not universally desired by everyone like the PR firm probably is. And so there's a bunch of those things there. But in terms of what makes it an expansion or not, it's at some point it feels like it's not critical or necessary for the game to be correct. That's again the borders that ended up being Suburbia Inc. There was discussion of using those sorts of things in Suburbia, and we tried some double tiles and some other things like that. And it really was just unnecessary, at some point. And you take those things out, and a lot of designers go through that process of you strip away the extra stuff, the fluff that you don't really need there as much. And that happens with a lot of games. It's rare that something gets added towards the end. It's much more common that at the end you realize, this extra thing, people are having issues around it. If we got rid of that or totally changed the way it worked, that actually solves an issue. And sometimes getting rid of it and going, put that aside, think about that for an expansion, and see maybe we can do something like that for an upcoming expansion.
So within the playtesting itself, there is the actual process, maybe not a conscious effort of, if we remove this makes the base game better, but maybe down the road we could develop this one aspect further and turn that into an expansion. So you're using some of that old work that you've used, and you're not throwing it away. You're just, look, the base game doesn't need this, is what you're saying?
Yeah. And I think it's not necessary for an expansion, although that comes to mind sometimes, but I'll come back to that. If it feels like it's missing this, I'll come back to that later. And then you never come back to it because you realize it wasn't really critical to it. So, that's where a lot of those things go. And, like I said, most things come out. It's rare that you put things in during the process. You put stuff in towards the beginning, and then, as playtesting goes on, there's a certain point you peak your reach, and then stuff just comes out and gets modified slightly. And those things that come out, when I look back on the original version of a game, or 1 month in playtesting, you realize there's a lot of stuff there that we took out, and for good reason at the time. But maybe now that the game is finished and now you can see how that would work with it, there's a way to maybe twist it around or modify it so that it's more functional.
Okay. I could see that. So then you had talked about earlier when you were talking about how you kind of have, for lack of I don't want to put hard buckets on this, but you have your social deduction games and then kind of the bigger box, kind of bigger strategy games.
Sure,
roughly, yeah. Right. Are there ever do games, obviously a strategy game doesn't become a social deduction game. I get that. but is there any kind of transformation that goes from one side to the other? Like you think it's going to fall into one bucket and it ends up, you know what, if we add this or we take this away, it switches buckets. Does that happen, or is that more the exception to the rule?
Yeah, I would say that probably doesn't happen. I mean, at least for those more distinct product lines in that area, it's either going to be more strategy based or it's going to be more social deduction, faster, lighter party-ish
Okay.
based.
So where did this social deduction stuff come from with you?
Love playing Werewolf. Love playing Werewolf. I was so frustrated with the commercial stuff that was out there. There were 3 games that were out there when I was playing Werewolf. It was Lupus and Tabula from Mayfair, which was the import of an Italian game. There's Werewolves of Miller's Hollow, which is an import of the French game from Asmodee now. It's another company that Asmodee purchased, like they do for lots of companies. And Looney Labs Are You a Werewolf? And Looney Labs Are You a Werewolf is probably the most popular one in the US at the time. All of them have just limitations. And I love playing Werewolf. And I was always frustrated that some of them had some things, some of them didn't have other things, but a lot of them just didn't have the right stuff as far as I was concerned. It's not the what I wanted in a werewolf game. The number one thing is none of those games had descriptions of the rolls on the cards, which you play, the more funky rolls you have in there, the harder it is for people to keep track of what they are. And having the descriptions on the cards, when they get their card, they look and they go, "Oh, I see. This is what the seer does, or the sorcerer does, or witch, or whatever the role is."
It's hard. It's hard to lie when you can't formulate who you are, right?
It's hard to ask the moderator, "Hey, what does this role do again?" Not that I have it, but just want to know
just
what team
curious
they're on and what they do. So there was that, and there's just a lot of other things. That was one thing, and the balancing, that games weren't balanced when you started to add the special roles that were in Miller's Hollow and Lupus and Tabula, just a bunch of things like that. And so, I made my own deck basically to play with when I played Werewolf, that it would be better. And I was doing Age of Steam maps at that point, but I really wasn't publishing anything else.
I see the correlation, Age of Steam, Werewolf. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I know it's kind of a weird thing. It seems to be separate groups. There's a little overlap. Some people do both. I know a lot of people who do both, but not some people definitely do not go between those two.
JC, right?
Yeah, he has not played a lot of social deduction games. Not a huge fan. He would like to play them with all the information, with the cards. One night with the cards face up,
right.
So not as good of a game that way. Probably playable, but just not as good. Full obsession with perfect information. I don't know if that's a genetic disorder he has or what that is exactly, but that he feels very strongly about that. But yeah, so I wanted to do that. I printed my own set with really crappy art, and then I printed some more for some more people. And then I'm like, well, I'll see what happens if I print a bunch and see if people want to buy them. And they did, and it sucked because I had to print them myself and cut them myself. And I printed 800 copies of the game and assembled it and myself, and it was a pain. And eventually I decided, you know what, I should probably do this for real. And then I went to the next level of getting a real artist to do the artwork and actually getting it produced as a real game. It's kind of started from there. And certainly, again, it's because I love the game, and there was not, it goes back to, I'm making a game for me. There was not a werewolf game out there that I thought was up to what I wanted to play. It didn't have the stuff I wanted. So I made my own.
And that goes back to the reason you design games, who you're designing for, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't know how many hundreds, again, thousands. I play a lot of werewolf as moderator as well as playing. But man, if I was still had to play with the other cards, I hate to rip on them, but again, that is why Ultimate Werewolf exists, is because those games were just not up to the level that I wanted them to be. They did not have the stuff in them. Doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they didn't have the stuff I wanted to play with them.
Right. It's just, it gave you a baseline to go from and then go from there, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
All right. So Bezier Games has made fair use, I think is a good way to put it, of Kickstarter in the past, especially for the social deduction games. What is it about those games that you feel make them a good fit for Kickstarter as opposed to some of the bigger strategy games, Suburbia, Castles, Colony, et cetera, et cetera? So why is it one finds its way onto Kickstarter and the other doesn't?
I mean, for us, really, Kickstarter is more about, hey, we have either extra stuff that we know people would like that we know we can't, it's too expensive to include in the game that we're going to sell, or that just doesn't make sense for us to just have on our website to sell. It's a little different with One Night now because there's a lot more people out there and probably could sell some more stuff. But in general, like additional art, a player mat, a bunch of those extras that we provide with the One Night games and the Kickstarters. We did plastic tokens for Alien and some other cool things that are just like, that's cool, but there's no way that we would go and create, hundreds of these, custom individual plastic tokens to replace the cardboard ones for all the games. It just makes sense for a Kickstarter because it seems like that's an appropriate thing for that. Ever since One Night came out, we've been using Kickstarter to basically be able to add extra stuff to a game.
So to trick out that game, kind of.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about Kickstarter. It's getting a version that has extra stuff, that's cool stuff in it that you don't get otherwise, and hopefully not just mechanical extras, but just bling, nicer pieces, upgraded parts, replacement things, minis, whatever. That's why I tend to back stuff for the most part, not because I want it sooner or because I'm not sure if it'll make in retail. Those are much more rare. It's more because I want extra stuff, whether it's in stretch goals or you get it, you buy the fancy version of the game. We're doing that with Werebeast right now. We have a deluxe version. And really the only reason we're doing it, well, there's two reasons, I guess, is the artist, Victor Perez Corbelli, it's amazing artwork. He's done artwork for some other games too. That's great. But he just did fantastic artwork for this game. And we actually had him do extra ones because we weren't sure which Werebeast we were going to include in the game. And so we ended up with extra stuff. And we're like, well, this sucks because we can only fit there's no reason to put more of those in the game. It would cost too much to print all those extra cards and put all those things in there. And people would be confused getting all those extra pieces when the game really only scales to 10. It doesn't scale higher than that. So a Kickstarter made a lot of sense for us to provide a way for other people to get that stuff. So we set those up as stretch goals in the Kickstarter. Now people can get those, when they back the game. And then the other thing was there's Werechow things, which are they're punchboard tokens right now. And one of the things I really wanted to do. Aluminum.
You did say Werechow, right?
Yeah, Werechow. That's what all the Werebeasts eat. It seemed obvious. I don't know if I have to explain that. I think anyone listening here knows what I'm talking about. So the whole idea with the Werechow is they're cans. They're cans of Werechow, like some sort of
as you would buy. Food.
Yes, yeah. So we even contacted Purina about seeing if we could get them just to have a run and get a bunch of antique cans made so people could use those cans. We tried a bunch of different can companies. Actually, we could not find metal cans, but we did find. So we're just going to do basically wood cylinders with stickers on them that really look like cans, and they're stackable and they're kind of cool, and they're more fun than just the cardboard tokens. But we couldn't do that in the game and still make it a $20 or $25 game.
Sure.
So that's another thing that Kickstarter is really good for. So there's a deluxe option where people get that, and we have to put it in a bigger box even because those things don't even fit in the regular box.
So that kind of, I guess, exemplifies your Kickstarter mentality of to trick out a game or to give you extra stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to if we offered it through Bezier in normal channels.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't do a Kickstarter for Werewords because at the time we didn't feel that we could add anything that added value that people would really want for Werewords, even though it would again fall in the same line as Werebeasts and One Night games for that. But there was really no reason to do a Kickstarter for it because we didn't, we could have done some sort of player map, but you don't really need one because you're not moving stuff around at night. We could have done one where you get a free Android or iOS tablet, and then we need to charge $600 for the game, but that seemed weird too. So, there wasn't a lot we could actually do Kickstarter wise that made sense for that. So we didn't do it. So it wasn't, it's not like because it's a small game, we're going to do that. It's more of, hey, we have some extra stuff here, and this is a way to get it out to people who, people who back on Kickstarter they're super excited about the game and they want that cool stuff. And that's a way for us to be able to get it to them, and it makes sense. The economies of scale kind of work out that way.
That's a cool way to use Kickstarter. I mean, I'm not the morality police saying, hey, there's only a certain way you're supposed to use Kickstarter, but I appreciate that you guys have a defined, hey, this is what we're going for when we use Kickstarter. I appreciate that. I think that's different than a lot of companies. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
on that.
I mean, I don't know. I think anyone can use Kickstarter. Kickstarter has a lot of things. I think for people to go with that assumption that it's only for testing out an idea to see if it's going to fly, that's one way. But there's lots of other ways you can use it. It's marketing. It's getting the word out for people. It's being able to find out really how many you should print. I mean, all those things are useful, and most Kickstarter backers seem to be okay with that. There's certainly a couple that get upset when a big publisher like Queen or Mayfair or someone they do a Kickstarter campaign. But it for them to do it, there's a reason. They're not. I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I do not think most publishers are doing it because they think that's a quick way to score some extra cash, direct sales. Kickstarter is a pain in the butt to do. Any Kickstarter campaign that's been successful, no one will tell you, oh yeah, it was nothing. Yeah, we just put some stuff up there, did a video, an hour, and then we're done, and we got a couple $100,000. It's a lot of work.
Well, not only that, but just keeping up with the comments is, God bless them, folks that do that. That is amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not that thing where people go, oh wow, you made a lot of money on Kickstarter. Well, not really. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. You certainly don't want to lose money, or want to come out better than break even. But it's not this money making machine that some people I think have this idea that a big company goes in there and they're just gouging their customers for some reason, or I don't know. But and if that is the intention, I think they learn pretty quickly, like, oh, this is not worth the effort to do that.
It's a
much better
lot of work goes into those things for sure.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite Bezier/Ted Alspach game? And what is your favorite non-Ted Alspach game?
I think my favorite game, and again, it's always hard because the newest stuff that you're publishing is so much more exciting. We played a couple of rounds of Werewords last night, and actually I didn't play. I watched because we were testing out some new stuff, and I still was having a blast just watching it. But I would probably say Suburbia. I think Suburbia, even more so than Castles, is it's closer to what I feel I really like in a game. Just that economic pressure, and that whole idea that there's that tipping point where you want to just shift gears and focus, and you've got your engine build up, and that for me is probably the top of the list.
All right.
Again,
favorite non-Bezier game?
Probably the favorite I would probably have to say Tichu, because I think Tichu is a game that I will probably play until I'm dead. I don't know if there's any other game that I didn't make that I will probably end up playing when I'm super, super old. But Tichu is probably one of those that I probably will do. That I think there is. It's a nice, complex climbing game that has a ton of strategy built into it, and it's got a bunch of downsides, and you need 4 people. You really need the 3 other people you're playing with to kind of have an idea of what's going on, or it's not that much fun. But overall, that's probably the one for long-term enjoyment. As far as traditional board games, the core, again, late 90s, early 2000s Euros are probably going to top the list. So things like El Grande.
We just played El Grande this last weekend, in fact. Yep.
I mean, El Grande it's almost magical in some ways, and in a way that all works together. And there's that kind of that up and down thing where you're trying to position yourself for the last rounds 3, 6, and 9, and there's just something about that game that's just amazing to call.
These are classics for a reason, right?
Kalis is at the top. I don't think Kalis gets as much love anymore as it should, but Kalis is an amazing game. The Provost in Kalis is one of the best NPCs in any game.
I guess I never really thought of it as an NPC, but that's exactly kind of what it is, right?
You can guide him a little bit, but he's on a mission.
And, he hates you.
Take advantage of him, or you get screwed by him. And right. So no, those as far as Euro type games, older one. So there's lots of new games that come out that I like and that I play, but those are the ones I think that I would always go back to, and I would always want to make sure I have at least one copy around. I think I have multiple copies of each of those games I just talked about.
All right, cool. All right, so that's pretty much all I have, except for my last 6 questions. So some questions that folks have asked throughout the discussion here. So going back to Age of Steam, Randall asks, with Mississippi Steamboat's map for Age of Steam, Did you think of the river current when going up and down the river, i.e. going up the river -1, going down the river adding 2, etc.?
I do not remember at this point if I did consider that or not. I don't remember it, so I probably didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not think that I ever took into consideration the current. There's a lot going on in that map. Otherwise, and that map is one of those awesome ones where those first couple turns, when you're trying to choose that spot that you want to get started in, because there's 3 spots. There's down by New Orleans, there's across the river from New Orleans, and then there's up top by Minneapolis and everything. And it's where do you start, and where can you see yourself growing? And there's pluses and minuses to all those. And I think that's always really interesting, and that's such a long-term strategy from that first turn, because you're going to see where those cubes are. You're going to look at the cube distribution as they're coming out, and you can, if you really process it, you do great things, hopefully. But a lot of times you'll struggle early on to get there, which is of course the age-of-steam thing. But yeah.
All right. So Rob asks, and I'm not really going to ask this. I'm just going to say that I'm going to try and start up a grassroots campaign to either get paper maps or hardbound maps reprinted of some of your older Age of Steam maps, and see if there's a demand for it, and if so, maybe it's something that you consider down the road. Let's see. Zan asks, what IP would you love to design a game around? Is there an IP?
Yeah, The Wire.
Oh, I love you.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the Wire seems like it would be the best in-depth social deduction game possible.
You want me to play a social deduction game, Ted? Make that happen.
Yeah. So that, to me, I mean, the layers of stuff that goes on in The Wire, it's a fantastic show, and I think that could, I don't know what it would take to do it right, and I've never even inquired about that, but that certainly is something that's always in the back of my head of like, that'd be really cool.
If David Simon's listening, please. Cool. So it's funny you bring that up. So I was laid up for a week, and I'm still recovering from Con Crud, the worst I've ever had from Gen Con. And so what do you do when you're sick? You go back and rewatch The Wire. So I'm into season 3 for the 4th time of The Wire, and Omar be coming, yo.
Yeah,
so happy you brought that up.
So phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, it's such a phenomenal show, and I think there's a lot of space there. It's sad that it didn't get as much acclaim when it was on as it has now. I think it's a lot of people's top 10 lists of their TV series now. I wonder what would have happened if they would have gone beyond their 5 seasons, or if it would have been a little different.
Right.
Otherwise.
Such a good show. My all-time favorite, number 1, if you ever watch a series on TV, it's going to ruin everything else. It's that good, I feel like.
Yeah. Yep, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, other people are like, oh, Breaking Bad's great. And Breaking Bad's a fantastic show. And there's other shows, The Shield, that are kind of in that same genre. But The Wire outdoes all of them. And it's tough. I know a lot of people, they watch an episode or two, they're like, I just don't get it. There's too much stuff going on, too many people. And yeah, it sucks. You got to stick with it for 4 or 5 episodes. But by the time you get to that episode where all they say is the F word for like 3 minutes, that's like episode 3 or 4.
Yep.
When they're looking at that, like how someone got shot.
Yep.
Then you realize, okay, this is amazing.
That is fantastic.
An amazing show.
All right, so Kabuki Kid asks, any thoughts to adding a sticker pack expansion for Fauna or Terra to add the no exact or adjacent spots on the board, like in America? Those spots improve the system.
That's an awesome idea. Actually, it could just be a print and play thing that you could just put off to the side.
Yeah.
For those. I don't know. I wouldn't do that with that. I'd have to talk to Friedemann about that, because I know that he wasn't upset with the stuff I added to America, but I don't know I don't know if that's like he thinks that would be a good addition to those games the way that they're set up, because they're a different set of questions and a different it's got a different tone than what
Gotcha.
America has. So that would certainly be worth I'll see him at Essen, and neither of us are ever busy at Essen, so I'm sure we'll have
none of us that go to Essen are ever busy, right? Especially you publishers. I mean,
so low key. I think that's the thing.
So
low key and relaxing. Those are the words I use to describe that.
Two things I never heard in regards to Essen. So last year was my first trip to Essen, and I had interviews set up for both Uli Blenneman of Spielworks and Bonnecore. And dude, I was, again, this being my first true experience of Essen, I was shocked at how much literal running around that publishers do. That it is, I mean, I was staggered by how busy everybody was there.
Yeah. And I think nobody can understand until you've been there and you see what it's like. I mean, Gen Con's awesome. And, Gen Con is getting more and more awesome every year. But still, Essen is its own thing. And it's just, yeah, it's overwhelming the first couple times you go there. And then it's still overwhelming now after I've been there, I don't know, 12, 15 years or however long I've been going.
This will be Amanda's first trip. And I've tried to warn her, but there's just, till you experience it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you're there Saturday and you're going, oh my God, it's already Saturday, and oh my gosh, there's still 2 more days left. And
yes,
they're inflating sort of things where, wow, I can't believe this has gone by so quick, and oh my God, there's still 2 more days.
How is there 2 more days? Yes. Kabuki Kid, what's your favorite Ameritrashy game?
I don't play hardly any Ameritrashy type games.
So it really is like
Betrayal,
social. Okay.
Yeah, but Betrayal's one. I mean, but I would tend probably to opt out of most of them for the most part. I don't think, yeah, it's just not my thing for the most part.
Which there's nothing wrong with. I would be of the same mind. So do you play a lot of your games after they're published, Werewolf notwithstanding?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is, it's demoing to other people. There's certainly
no. I'm talking. Do you play? Like if you ever have free time?
No. It's very sad. Well, part of it is, I played. I've even played the final version because I'm demoing it and showing it to people. I played that the final version dozens of times usually after it's done, but I played it hundreds of times before that. So yeah, that's pretty rare. And the other thing is, there's always stuff that we're playtesting, that would take precedence. And there's, of course, all the other games that we've purchased that also take precedence. So we have a bunch of new games. We got, I don't know, 50 games at Gen Con we're all excited about. And I've only played maybe 15 of them at this point. And here we are more than 2 weeks after Gen Con. And, I've only done 25% of them. And the goal is get rid of all those, play all those games from Gen Con before Essen. And that's going to be tight.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who's in this industry now can appreciate how hard that can be at times.
Yeah.
How time is at a premium. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So not really a question, but a pretty good comment. So Rob, super chat, he said, I want to play One Night Ultimate Werewolf with JCL, open information on hexes and with character rusting.
That would be awesome. It'd be brutal, but it would be awesome. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be awesome to watch other people do it. Maybe I think that's probably the thing.
I think I would like to observe that game. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, series of 6 fun yet thoughtful questions that I try and ask everybody that sits down. Conversations with Heavy Cardboard. So, are you willing, Ted?
Sure.
All right. Maybe. Here we go.
I guess.
For top of your head, first thing comes to mind. Here we go. Number 1. How old would you be if you didn't actually know how old you are?
20.
Okay. If you could master one skill that you do not have right now, what would it be? Anything.
Skiing.
Not snowboarding, but specifically skiing?
Yeah, my brain doesn't work. I've tried, and I don't understand how you're supposed to lean away from where you're turning. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't even want to learn how to ski. I just want to be able to do it. I'm not like, oh, it'd be so cool to go on a mountain. It's just that I'm frustrated that I can't. That something in my brain does not let me do that. I don't know what that is. So, yeah.
If you could have dinner and conversation with any person in history, who would it be? Assuming you would also have clear communication with them.
People laugh if I say Kesha, so I won't say that. No, that's
why Kesha? Why
that would
Kesha?
Be very interesting. In general, I actually put a note in Suburbia Inc. to see if anyone noticed, and someone did put a comment about it. But actually, when you're thanking different people, there's a line in there that says "Thanks to Kesha for something," and it was kind of funny because, I have
and my daughter's still a teenager, I guess. But I have kids and they listen to all sorts of music, and I don't really mind. I like pop music and stuff too. But I very much appreciate all the musical artists that have, they basically have achieved success based on their own ingenuity and determination and whatever. And Kesha would fall into that category. I don't think I would have anything in common with Kesha, but I think I can appreciate Kesha and lots of other people like that in what they do and how they do it. But that's I don't think that would be the person I would choose.
But still, that's my favorite answer of all time. Of everybody I've asked, that is far and away my favorite answer.
Yeah. My wife thinks it's very silly that I got the new Kesha CD, and there's a lot of music on there where she's swearing and cursing, and I'm like, this is awesome. And she's like, she's saying a lot of bad words, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's still awesome. Oh well.
Awesome. I thank you for that. What are 3 things that you would like more of right now? Could be physical, could be characteristics, ideas, anything, time, whatever.
At this point, I would like to be able to eat anything I want to without gaining weight.
As somebody who just lost 45 pounds, I can appreciate that.
Yeah. So that's annoying. I used to have awesome metabolism, and now that has gone out the
window. Getting old sucks.
It's terrible.
3 things. That's 1.
Oh, 3 things. Oh,
yeah.
3 things. Okay. Well, that's 3 different types of food. Anything else? I don't know. No, I'm pretty happy. It's not like I go like, oh, I wish I had something. Yeah. Free time, I guess, more extra free time to play more games would be one thing. It never seems like there's enough time to play games. Definitely short on that. Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, more. We have 2 cats. Having kittens and having them perpetually be kittens. That would be awesome.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Cats are quite nice, but kittens are awesome, and it'd be nice to have more kittens. So There we go.
All right. Yeah. What do you appreciate the most in your friends?
I think dependability would be number 1 thing.
Okay. And I feel like I need to change this answer because I always get the same answer, but what's your absolute dream job?
Yeah, you're going to get the same answer, I think, for me, because I'm doing it right now. This is it. Yeah, there's nothing else that I wish I was doing instead of this. So I'm very, very happy with this time. And I feel very fortunate that I'm able to do this full time. So yeah, this is it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, running a board game company and designing games. I mean, that is, for me, that's, you would have told 1995 Ted that he'd be doing this full time, and 1995 Ted would have said, shut up, and maybe punched you for being a jerk. But yeah, that's awesome.
Fantastic. All right. So, yeah, that's all I got. So, Ted, on behalf of myself and Amanda, we really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. This is pretty cool.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Good. I appreciate it. And like I said earlier, I think of myself as the world's biggest 5-year-old. And for me, I like being able to dig into the minds of those that are in this industry and that are willing to take the time, because I always like knowing the behind the scenes stuff. So I imagine if I do, then other people out there do as well. So definitely appreciate it. It was a lot of fun on my part because I get to ask questions that I want to know the answers to. So thanks for taking a couple hours with us. Really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. It was fun.
All right, cool. So everybody, thanks for watching. Thank you also to our patrons that help make all this positive or possible. Patreon.com/heavy cardboard. And Ted, you want to, it's listed down below, but for those listening to the podcast later, you want to tell folks how to be able to get a hold of you and your games?
Yeah, sure. Just go to BezierGames.com. Most of the games that I've designed are there, although there's a few from other publishers at this point. And of course, easiest way to do that, go on BGG and just look it up as a designer, or Bezier Games as a publisher.
All right. Awesome. So again, Ted, thank you for taking the time. Everybody that joined us live, really appreciate it. Appreciate the questions and the humor throughout the discussion. And we'll be back later on this week with more live streams. So thanks, everybody. We'll catch you all later. Bye.